This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. With training camp being here, it brings the question that there are a lot of Browns on the roster that stand to lose a lot if they have a bad performance during the preseason, during training camp. So those are the players I want to focus on. I got 5 guys who really have to step it up this training camp, or else their standing with this team in the future is going to be questioned. Now, some of these guys are here because of non-standard level of play reasons. Some of these guys are here because they've been injured or they have a history of injury. Some of these guys are here because they're just at a crossroads with their career. But this is going to be a very, very important training camp for these 5 players for a lot of different reasons. So let's talk about the first guy. I've talked about it all offseason. This is going to be the training camp of Cedric Tillman's life. He is going to have to show up and show early and often that he has improved. Now, with Amari Cooper no longer holding out, he's going to report day 1 in camp. We don't know if that means he's going to practice day 1 in camp, but it does mean that he will be available sooner than later for the Browns in team drills. With that being the case, Cedric Tillman is going to have even less opportunities to prove this, especially with the first team, especially with Deshaun Watson. And the reason I think it's important that Cedric Tillman prove himself, not just on the third team or on the second team or wherever he's taking these reps, he has to prove himself with the starters. He has to prove himself with Deshaun Watson, because what he has to rebuild is trust. I'm not sure how much I would trust Cedric Tillman if I were Kevin Stefanski or Deshaun Watson. Now, the one thing Cedric does have going for him is that those aren't the only 2 names involved in the process. Ken Dorsey is, and Ken Dorsey knows nothing of Cedric Tillman to distrust him. But if I'm Kevin, I worry about running Cedric Tillman over the middle of the field, because what if he's not there? You worry about giving him a double move in a system where you're going to give wide receivers more freedom, and it's going to be a little bit more complicated. Like, what if he doesn't make the right read? He already wasn't where he was supposed to be in a system that pretty much plans out where you're supposed to be. So what if it gets even worse with him? You don't want to throw a lot of interceptions, right? You don't want to turn the ball over. It's the number one thing the Browns are trying to reduce. So from a coaching standpoint, I can see why you don't trust him. From a quarterback standpoint, I mean, it's 100% reasonable why any quarterback, especially any veteran quarterback, would not trust Cedric Tillman. He has not demonstrated himself as a wide receiver worthy of trust. And that might trickle down to how Ken Dorsey feels about him. Either way, he has to prove himself. He has to show himself to be somebody who's reliably going to be where he's supposed to be. We know he's a talented athlete. We know he has high potential because of that athletic ability. What we don't know with Cedric Tillman is if he can be where he's supposed to be when he say he's supposed to be there, right? That's the number one ability is availability, and availability for Cedric Tillman isn't his health in this case. It is his ability to be where the play is saying he's supposed to be where the quarterback expects him to be where the offensive coordinator and the head coach expect him to be. He has to demonstrate that. He has to rebuild that trust with the coaching staff. He has to rebuild that trust with Deshaun Watson. And this is the training camp where he's going to have that opportunity, because it's a new offense, new offensive coordinator. Also, it's just his second year in the NFL. So he's going to have that. But if this becomes a 2-year thing, people ain't really trying to give you that 3rd year to figure out if you're going to be where you're supposed to be. You know what I mean? Like, you get 2 years before you start to build a reputation in the NFL, positive or negative. And for Cedric Tillman, got to figure it out. Got to figure it out sooner than later. Unfortunately for Cedric and for DTR, they're both on this list. DTR is the second guy that I think is going to have a lot to lose during this camp. Some of the things similar to Cedric Tillman. We kind of swept this under the rug. We kind of let it go when it happened. But I do think it matters. DTR was the backup quarterback, and he was not close to being prepared to play. Now, I know a lot of people blame that on Kevin Stefanski, right? And maybe it's Kevin Stefanski's fault for not declaring DTR the starter early on. And I think some portion is reasonable to blame Kevin Stefanski for that. But also, dog, the backup quarterback is supposed to be ready to get in the game in a moment's notice, let alone a week notice or 2 days notice. Like, there's no real way you can flip it to me that DTR should have been as unprepared as he was going into that game. And it felt like he wasn't prepared because he didn't believe that he would play. Now, he rectified that. He was much more prepared for his game against Pittsburgh. There was an apparent level of distrust there with the coaching staff of what they asked him to do. And then you might throw that on him being a rookie, but I think it has more to do with the other aspects with DTR, but who knows, who cares, right? What DTR is here to prove is that he can still be that developmental backup to the Cleveland Browns. Let me tell you what's not good for DTR, or developments that weren't good for DTR in the offseason that happened in him being able to have that role. One, he was the backup last year, right? That's where DTR ended the season last year, as the backup. As a result of last year, the Cleveland Browns not only felt it necessary to spend money on a backup quarterback, a veteran backup quarterback, and maybe that has more to do with Deshaun Watson than it does DTR, right? But it does have something to do with DTR, because if DTR was more prepared, made the coaching staff more comfortable, they would have been fine with DTR stepping in if Deshaun Watson has to mix games. But something made them go from, hey, if Deshaun Watson misses games in 2023, we're fine with DTR stepping in, to if Deshaun Watson misses games in 2024, we got to pay somebody to be the backup. That's the shift. That's one shift. The second shift is bringing in Tyler Huntley. And I've heard a ton of different explanations for bringing in Tyler Huntley. At the very least, Tyler Huntley is here to compete for that third quarterback spot. And he's way more qualified than DTR is. Now, DTR has youth on his side and hope on his side, right? Tyler Huntley is what Tyler Huntley is. But once you start talking about third string quarterback, you ain't really invested in hope at that point. You're invested in floor at that point. Can I get a good game or two from this guy? And I think the Browns will likely feel like Tyler Huntley can give you a game more confidently than DTR. Where does that leave DTR? I don't know. It's a loaded roster. He could get traded. He could end up on the practice squad. He could get cut outright and signed off waivers somewhere. But if DTR wants to stay in Cleveland, he's going to have a significant camp, much like he did last year. But that's where DTR is. So enough with the two Las Vegas second-year players. Let's talk about Jack Conklin. Jack Conklin is in a tough spot. Not only did he get injured, horrible last year. I think he got injured in the first game of last season. And he's still not cleared to practice, which is a bit of a concern, right? This is not Nick Chubb recovering from like the worst knee injury you've ever seen in your life. This is Jack Conklin recovering from what was a routine season-ending injury, as routine as those can be. And he's still not back. There's no word on if he's going to be back. He might be back. He's on PUP right now, but he might be back in a week or day or whatever it is. But what that does mean is that it's more days that will go by that he's not starting, that DeJuan Jones is starting. And the more you let that happen, if you're Jack Conklin, the more you close whatever competition is there on you being able to start this year. Now, look, we can be honest about this. There's not much here for Jack Conklin. Like, there's a debate on whether he should start this year or whether he should flip DeJuan to left and move Jack to right. I find it highly unlikely that they do something like that. One, I don't think it's as good as an idea as people think it is once you really think about it, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Two, just simply, if they were going to do that, they would have tried to do that in OTAs. Like, we would know if DeJuan Jones was flipping the left tackle, because they would have made it clear that that's what DeJuan Jones is to spend his summer on, is flipping the left tackle. You don't want to do that 4 weeks before the season starts. That's silly. It's dysfunctional if that's your plan. And I hope that's not the plan, because if that is, it's a dysfunctional plan by the Cleveland Browns. Now let's talk about this whole flipping DeJuan Jones and Jack Conklin just being an outright bad idea. The reason I think it's an outright bad idea is, one, there's no guarantee that DeJuan Jones is a good left tackle. There's hope, but there's no guarantee. What there is a guarantee is that DeJuan Jones is a pretty damn good right tackle. You're flipping the left, you might change some things, you might break them. And potentially what could happen is that you flip DeJuan Jones to left, you start Jack Conklin on the right side, then Jack Conklin gets hurt. Then what's next? Well, we're going to move Jed Wills back to right, so we're talking about crisscrossing our entire offensive line, having a right tackle who's been a left tackle play right tackle, and a left tackle who's been a right tackle play left tackle. I see far more ways that can go wrong than work out. Now, I am worried about the Browns offensive line more so than most people. I just don't think those are solutions, right? I don't think you can just swap people out position to position all willy-nilly and think that's going to work out. That's not a good solution. The only solution for the Browns offensive line is going to include good drafting, good free agencies, and time. Like, there's no quick fix to whatever you think the Browns' issues are. Their issues are their issues going into this season. If you want the Browns to have a good offensive line, you kind of just got to hope that Jed Wills plays as well as he did at the end of his run last year than he did at the beginning. Got to hope that DeJuan Jones holds up at right tackle. Got to hope that Wyatt Teller has a much better year this year than he's had the last couple. That's the only hope for the Browns offensive line. You're not going to find hope by switching, swapping, and moving around these guys. And again, the Browns aren't going to do that, because if they were going to do that, we would know by now. This would be something they would have spent their summer on, not something that they spring up in the middle of training camp. I find the Browns to hopefully be a more functional organization than that. Let's talk about Mo Hurst. Mo Hurst is not in this spot because he played badly last year or even because he got injured last year. Mo Hurst is in this spot because he's just in a tough spot here. Now, the Browns drafted Michael Hall. Michael Hall does a lot of the same stuff that Mo Hurst has. In the same way that last year I felt like, hey, if I'm Jack Conklin, I stay healthy, because the second DeJuan Jones steps out there, you might not get your job back. That's the same feeling I have for Mo Hurst. Mo Hurst got to stay healthy, because if you let Michael Hall get in there, he has similar traits to where he might take that spot from you, and it might be justified. But for Mo Hurst, staying healthy and playing well this year, I think will go a long way for him, right? It's not going to give him a big money deal, but it might give him a pretty decent money deal for 2 years with another team after he's done with the Cleveland Browns. Like, he needs another year of staying healthy. He needs another year of pretty solid production. And I think if he can get that, he'll get a nice contract somewhere else. So I think that's what's on the line for Mo Hurst, because if he gets hurt again, and then he's getting closer and closer to that 32, 33 years old mark where teams start to really get scared off by your injury rap sheet, then that's where careers start to end. And he's too talented for his career to start to end that soon. But the injuries have just followed him. And he needs a healthy year where he could put a good season together. And that will be enough to make sure his career continues going. Jerome Ford, another one with a lot to lose here. Look, Jerome Ford, on paper, you could say had a pretty damn good year last year. Over 1,000 yards total when you combine rushing and receiving. Had a lot of touchdowns. Had a lot of great moments last year. To me, I feel like Jerome Ford is a running back in a spot that's not really beneficial to him when Nick Chubb's not here, right? When Nick Chubb's not here, they make him the feature back. He is not a feature back. What I think Jerome Ford is a change of pace and receiving back, similar to Nyheim Hines, who's also here. And that's the battle that Jerome Ford has right now. I think they like Jerome Ford, but I think they also like Nyheim Hines. We'll see what they do with that. But if you're Jerome Ford and you want to keep this role and you want to get some extended production, you got to figure out what went wrong with your feet and your vision last year. And you just got to put a more consistent season behind you. And it starts at training camp, right? You're also going to be competing with Pierre Strong, right? You're also going to be competing with all these other guys at the back end of the Browns roster. Aidan Robbins is somebody that a lot of people are excited about on the Browns online stuff because of his size and speed combination. So a lot's going to be there for Jerome Ford to compete with during camp. Like, I don't expect him to compete with what D'Onta Foreman does, and I don't expect him to compete with what Nick Chubb does. But every other back on that roster, he's going to be in a battle with. And, you know, it's his prove-it year for him, right? This is his third year in the league. It's going to be a prove-it year for him. There's a lot on the line this training camp, but that's my guys who I think have a lot on the line this training camp. Let me know yours in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.